So I want you to think about, well, think of the absolute worst injustice you saw on the news this week.
Oh, yeah, there's always something.
Right. Or maybe it wasn't even on the news. Maybe it was just something you witnessed firsthand, in your office or your neighborhood.
Or even in your own family.
Exactly. Just someone acting with total reckless disregard for others, doing quantifiable harm, ruining lives, and then, well, nothing happens.
Nothing at all.
No lightning bolt from a clear blue sky, no sudden karmic retribution. They just walk away, they get the promotion, they keep the money, and they sleep soundly.
Which is infuriating.
It is. And if you are an empathetic human being with a pulse, your immediate visceral instinct is this burning demand for the universe to step in. We want the gavel to drop in milliseconds. Like, why didn't whatever powers that be just stop it the second it happened?
It really is the ultimate human frustration, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
our internal biological and moral clocks, they're wired for immediate cause and effect.
Yeah, action and reaction.
Exactly. I mean, if I touch a hot stove, I get burned immediately.
Yeah.
So when we witness profound moral wrongdoing, we just naturally expect the moral universe to operate with that same instant reflexive physical feedback.
We want the moral burn to happen right away.
Right. And when it doesn't, we experience massive cognitive dissonance. We basically equate a delay in justice with a fundamental failure of the system.
Like whoever is in charge is just asleep at the wheel.
Or worse, that they simply do not care.
Right, it feels like total absence.
Mhm.
But today's source material argues something so counterintuitive that it kind of, well, it stops you in your tracks.
It really does.
Because what if that delay, that maddening, agonizing wait for the scales to balance, isn't a sign of weakness or cosmic apathy?
Yeah, what if it's the opposite?
Exactly. What if the universe actually operated on our preferred timeline of instant, unyielding justice, you and I wouldn't even be alive to listen to this deep dive right now?
That's the core premise, yeah.
So today, we are exploring a really dense, fascinating text and a series of complex visual infographics by Chris R. Velazquez. And it's all titled Divine Patience, God Delays Judgment.
It's a fantastic resource.
And the mission today is to completely deconstruct and rebuild how we understand time, delay, and consequences based on his work.
And it really is a total deconstruction. Because Velazquez's work is incredibly expansive. I mean, he isn't just writing some quick devotional thought about, being a more patient person in traffic.
Right, taking deep breaths at a red light.
Yeah. No, he is laying out this comprehensive systemic look at how the concept of divine patience is the actual engine driving the entirety of human history.
The whole thing.
From the opening pages of creation all the way to the heat death of the universe, essentially. It directly challenges some of the most deeply held yet entirely unexamined assumptions we have about how justice and mercy are actually supposed to interact.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to even begin to grasp why delay is so universally misunderstood by us, we have to put human psychology under the microscope.
We really do.
We have to look at what waiting actually means to a species that absolutely hates to wait.
Well, the author points out that human beings are just terrible interpreters of delay. Because we are bound by time, right? Our lives are so short. So we project our own limitations onto the divine timeline.
Yeah, we map our flaws onto God.
Exactly. If a human being delays doing something, it's usually because, well, we lack the power to do it, or we lack the resources, or maybe we are afraid of the confrontation.
Or we just forgot.
Right. So we assume God is doing the same thing. The text argues that we mistake patience for tolerance. We mistake silence for absence. And most fatally, we mistake a postponed judgment for moral irrelevance.
Like the human mind sees no immediate punishment and just concludes, well, the rules must not matter anymore.
Exactly. The lack of consequence equals a lack of rules to us.
I was trying to map this onto a scenario we all recognize, and it made me think of that classic parent counting to 3 dynamic.
Oh, that is a perfect example.
Right. We've all seen this. You're at a restaurant or maybe a grocery store, and there is a toddler just losing their mind, throwing sugar packets, screaming, causing absolute chaos.
And everyone is just staring.
Yeah, and the parent, instead of immediately bodily removing the child from the premises, just stands there, locks eyes, and goes, 1, 2.
And the judgment from the room is palpable.
Oh, if you are the annoyed bystander sitting at the next table, you are judging that parent so hard. You're thinking, what a weak, ineffective authority figure. They don't care that my dinner is ruined. They have no control over this situation.
That is a phenomenal way to illustrate the psychological gap here. Because you, as the bystander, You only care about the immediate cessation of the noise.
I want instant justice for my ruined dinner.
Right. But what is the parent actually doing? The parent possesses absolute, overwhelming physical power in that dynamic. They could effortlessly end the scenario by snatching the child up at second zero.
Yeah, they have total control.
But they are intentionally holding that power in reserve.
Exactly. Well, wait, not exactly. It's actually much deeper than that. The parent is engineering a window. It is a highly deliberate, high-stakes window of time.
Yes, engineered space.
They aren't delaying because they are confused about what the kid is doing. They are delaying to give that child the agency and the opportunity to self-correct before the hammer falls. They are valuing the child's internal realization over the bystander's demand for instant quiet.
And that is precisely the definition of divine patience that Velazquez establishes right at the outset of this text. He explicitly defines it as justice held back in mercy for a time.
Justice held back.
I really want to emphasize that phrase, justice held back.
Yeah.
Divine patience. In this framework, it is not a soft doctrine. It isn't some accidental feature of a laid-back deity.
It's not leniency.
No, it is a muscular, intentional, and highly active restraint. God isn't waiting because he is gathering evidence or because he is intimidated by the offender. He is holding back a rightful, immediate consequence specifically to accomplish a larger redemptive design.
Which is an incredibly humbling concept when you zoom out from the toddler in the restaurant to the scale of actual human history.
The scale is mind-boggling.
If you follow the logic of this text, if the gavel of justice dropped the very millisecond a wrong was committed anywhere on Earth, I mean, if the universe gave us the instant accountability we are always demanding on social media,
The human story would have been a very short book.
it would have been over in the first few chapters.
Without a doubt. The author makes the point that the very breath in our lungs today is a direct, tangible byproduct of this postponed judgment.
Wow.
If the divine timeline operated on the human expectation of instant, localized retribution, the compounding weight of human selfishness, greed, and violence, it would have necessitated the end of the world thousands of years ago.
So the delay is keeping us alive.
The delay isn't a glitch in the Matrix. The delay is the only reason the Matrix is still running.
So if we accept this premise that patience is this active, world-sustaining restraint rather than just a cosmic shrug, where does the author actually anchor this idea? Because it's one thing to philosophize about it, but Velazquez grounds this very specifically in a historical and textual blueprint, right?
He does. He roots the entire framework in a foundational moment from the Old Testament,
Yep.
specifically in the book of Exodus, chapter 34.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So this is arguably the most precarious moment in the early history of the Israelites. They have just been miraculously rescued from slavery in Egypt. They have literally just agreed to a covenant, a marriage contract with God.
They got the rules.
Right. And while Moses is up on the mountain getting the actual physical tablets of this contract, the people get impatient. They build a golden calf.
Typical human impatience.
Exactly. They throw a massive idolatrous festival. It is a catastrophic, immediate betrayal of everything they literally just agreed to.
It's the ultimate breach of contract before the ink is even dry.
Right. And in the immediate aftermath of this, God reveals his core character to Moses. It's the first time God really unpacks his own resume, so to speak. And the text, Velazquez quotes, is Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7.
What does it say?
God declares that he is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. I need to push back on this text because the author uses this as his foundational pillar, but the very next sentence in that verse creates a massive philosophical traffic jam.
The part about the guilty?
Yeah, he says, he is slow to anger, but then follows it up by saying, yet by no means clearing the guilty. How on earth do those two realities coexist in the same entity?
It sounds like a total contradiction.
It does. In a human legal system, if a judge refuses to clear the guilty, they have to drop the hammer. If they are patient and just let the guy walk around for another 10 years, they're effectively clearing the guilty by default. This feels like an oxymoron.
And that tension you are feeling right there, that is the exact engine of the entire biblical narrative according to Velazquez. How do you balance absolute, uncompromising holiness with long-suffering mercy?
It seems impossible.
The author answers this with a concept he calls covenantal endurance. You essentially have to separate the verdict from the execution of the sentence.
Oh, okay, break that down for me.
So when the text says God does not clear the guilty, it means the moral standard is never lowered. God does not sweep the golden calf under the rug.
He doesn't just say, oh, boys will be boys.
Exactly. Let's just pretend this didn't happen. No, the guilt is fully established. The offense is deeply fundamentally real. But covenantal endurance means that he actively governs and restrains his immediate rightful wrath.
He pauses the
He
execution.
pauses the execution of the sentence to allow a space for the offender to change course.
So he maintains the reality of the guilt, but alters the timeline of the consequence.
Exactly. And once you understand that mechanism, you suddenly see it playing out vividly throughout the entire historical timeline Velazquez provides in the infographics.
Like where?
Well, look at the wilderness period, right after the golden calf. The people spend 40 years wandering in the desert. They grumble constantly. They rebel against leadership.
They kept complaining about the food, right?
Yes, they actually express a desire to go back to slavery in Egypt just because they miss the food. It's an ongoing generational provocation.
And the rational response from a strictly just deity would be, fine, you want to go back, I'm done, you're on your own in the desert.
But what actually happens, the text emphasizes that while discipline does occur, I mean, there are plagues, there are severe consequences for specific rebellions, the overarching reality is preservation.
He keeps them alive.
God literally drops bread from the sky every single morning. He provides water from rocks. He leads them with a pillar of fire. The discipline is meticulously measured.
That's not total annihilation.
Never an instant total eradication of the people. Their constant unbelief is answered by targeted discipline operating within a massive overarching canopy of patience.
You really see that dynamic escalate when you move out of the desert and into the era of the monarchy. Because the kings of Israel and Judah are, by and large, a disaster class in leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
You have Saul's paranoia and failure. David, the so-called man after God's own heart, he commits adultery and orchestrates a murder to cover it up.
Such a massive failure.
And Solomon, for all his wisdom, he completely compromises the kingdom's religious integrity by building altars to foreign gods for his political alliances. The nation basically cascades into systemic injustice and idolatry for centuries.
Which brings us to the role of the prophets. And I think Velazquez's reframing here is one of the most brilliant parts of the deep dive.
Yeah, let's talk about the prophets.
Because in popular culture, we tend to view the Old Testament prophets, Elijah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Amos, as these wild-eyed, angry doomsayers who just show up out of nowhere to yell at people and predict the end of the world.
Yeah, like the guy on the street corner with the cardboard sign saying, "Repent, the end is near." We view them as agents of wrath.
But the author completely flips that. The text argues that the very existence of a prophet is undeniable, living proof that judgment has been delayed.
Wow. If judgment was instant, there'd be no need to warn anyone.
Exactly. If God were strictly operating on instant justice, there would be no need for prophets. A prophet is essentially a divine defense attorney showing up at the 11th hour, begging the defendant to take a plea deal before the judge is forced to drop the gavel.
They are the physical manifestation of mercy actively seeking a hearing.
Mercy seeking a hearing.
I really like that imagery, mercy seeking a hearing. It means that every time a prophet speaks, it's a clock ticking, sure, but it's also a door being held open.
Velazquez points specifically to Jeremiah to highlight the sheer heartbreak of this dynamic. I mean, Jeremiah preaches for decades. He is mocked, he is thrown into a muddy cistern, he is ignored by the kings and the public alike.
And he just has to keep going.
God just keeps sending him back. God keeps speaking into the void, enduring centuries of profound offense and injustice before finally allowing the Babylonian Empire to conquer Jerusalem and send the people into exile.
But even then, and this is something the infographics map out so well, the exile isn't the total annihilation it could have been. A remnant is preserved. The line continues.
It is a severe, devastating judgment, yes, but it is a judgment that operates inside a larger blueprint of patience.
Okay, I follow the historical track record, but looking at this critically, this tension from Exodus 34, the not clearing the guilty versus the slow to anger, it feels like a rubber band that is being stretched tighter and tighter over centuries.
It is a lot of tension.
You have all these offenses piling up, you have prophets pleading, you have temporary exiles, but legally and philosophically, you cannot just delay justice infinitely.
No, you can't.
If a judge keeps delaying the sentencing of a known criminal year after year, decade after decade, eventually that judge is corrupt. The tension demands a resolution, which brings us, according to the text, to the absolute center of human history.
It brings us to the New Testament, and specifically to Jesus, where this concept of divine patience steps out of the shadows of the Old Testament and into blinding, sobering light.
Velazquez points out that during his earthly ministry, Jesus didn't just teach about this patience. He literally embodied it in his daily interactions.
He really did.
You read the gospel accounts, and it's honestly exhausting to see what he put up with. He is constantly bearing with the disciples who are incredibly slow to understand the mission.
They were always arguing.
Yeah, they are arguing about who is the greatest while he is literally talking about dying. Peter profoundly publicly betrays him, and Jesus later cooks him breakfast and restores him.
That's patience.
He stands over Jerusalem and actually weeps, mourning the fact that they are rejecting the very peace he is offering.
And his teachings reinforce this reality of living in a delayed timeline. Look at the parable's Velazquez highlights. Jesus tells the story of 10 bridesmaids waiting for a bridegroom who is delayed long into the night.
Oh, right, the lamps.
Yeah, he tells of a wealthy master who travels to a far country and doesn't return for a long time, leaving his servants to manage the estate. He is constantly programming his followers to expect a long, drawn-out period where the final resolution is suspended.
There is one parable in particular that I think perfectly captures the tension we've been talking about, which is the parable of the wheat and the weeds.
That's a crucial one.
For those who aren't familiar, a farmer plants good wheat, and an enemy comes at night and sows weeds right on top of it. The farmhands come to the master and say, "Should we go rip out the weeds right now?" And the master says no.
Which is such a counterintuitive agricultural strategy.
Right, but the master's logic is if you gather the weeds now, you'll uproot the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. It is a masterclass in delayed judgment.
It really is.
The master acknowledges the weeds are bad. He acknowledges they don't belong there, but he explicitly delays the justice of removing them to protect the fragile wheat that is still growing.
And this framework of an intentional protective delay becomes the core foundation of the apostles' teaching after Jesus is gone. The author's infographics pull out 2 verses that are absolutely staggering when you read them through this lens.
Let's hear them.
The first is Romans 2.4, where the Apostle Paul essentially asks his readers, "Do you presume on the riches of his kindness and forbearance and patience, not knowing that God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance?"
He's directly calling out that human bias we talked about at the beginning. The assumption that a lack of lightning bolts means God doesn't care.
Exactly.
Paul is saying, no, the quiet skies are a kindness designed to give you time to turn around.
And then there's the absolute linchpin text from 2 Peter 3.9. Peter writes, "The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance."
As some count slowness, that phrase is brilliant because it acknowledges our frustration.
It validates it.
It validates the person looking at the news and saying, why is this taking so long? Peter saying, I know it looks like slowness to your human eyes, but it isn't a glitch. It's a rescue operation.
But this brings us back to the rubber band you mentioned earlier. How does this resolve the legal tension? If God is infinitely patient, how does he avoid being an unjust judge who just lets the guilty off the hook?
Yes. Because if I commit a massive financial fraud and I get caught, the judge can't just say, well, I'm a patient and loving judge, so I'm not going to sentence you. Go home and think about what you did.
That's a mistrial.
That's a profound injustice to the victims. The debt still exists. The damage is still done. So how does the source material reconcile the ledger?
This is where Velazquez argues that the cross is the ultimate cosmic intersection of these 2 competing forces. He uses a phrase in the visual materials that is vital here. He says, patience and justice meet at the cross.
Patience and justice meet.
This is the theological mechanism that solves the mistrial analogy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Walk me through the mechanics of that. Because to a lot of modern ears, the idea of substitutionary atonement, someone else taking the punishment, it sounds like a different kind of injustice.
This is to a lot of people.
If I commit the fraud and my innocent friend steps up and says, I'll go to prison for him, a human judge can't legally accept that. You can't punish an innocent party to clear a guilty one.
In a strictly horizontal, human-to-human legal system, you are absolutely right. It would be a complete miscarriage of justice. But the author's framework relies on the unique nature of the Son.
Okay, how so?
Jesus isn't just an innocent bystander or a well-meaning friend volunteering. In Christian theology, he is the very God against whom the offense was committed, taking on human flesh to absorb the penalty himself.
Ah. Oh, I see. So it's less like a friend going to prison for my fraud and more like, well, like I committed the fraud against the bank. I owe the bank $1 billion I can never repay.
Right.
And the owner of the bank steps out from behind the desk, pulls out his own personal checkbook, and pays the debt to his own institution on my behalf.
That is a much closer analogy. The justice of the bank is fully satisfied. The debt is paid. It wasn't ignored or swept under the rug. I mean, it cost the owner dearly.
Yeah, he had to pay it himself.
But because the debt is paid, the bank is no longer required to foreclose on your life immediately. At the cross, the righteous judgment that was due for human rebellion actually falls. It isn't delayed anymore, it hits.
But it hits the sun.
Exactly. Justice is comprehensively satisfied in the suffering of Christ.
And because that justice was satisfied, the rubber band doesn't snap and destroy humanity.
Exactly. Or rather, I should say you hit the nail on the head, because the author concludes that God can now righteously, legally delay the final judgment for the world at large.
The legal ledger is balanced.
The world continues to spin on its axis today, precisely because the news of this satisfied justice, the gospel, is now being actively announced. Vlassis writes, divine patience is therefore grounded in atonement.
That concept completely short-circuits how I normally view history. We tend to view history as just neutral, chronological time ticking forward.
Or a countdown to a disaster.
Yeah, maybe as a countdown clock to some apocalyptic disaster. But Vlassis is arguing that history itself is being actively held open by the cross, like someone wedging their foot in a closing elevator door.
An active hold.
The time we are living in right now, this very Tuesday afternoon, isn't just random time. It is borrowed time. It is heavily subsidized grace time.
It is an era defined entirely by a suspended sentence. Now, knowing what happened at the cross is essential, but Vlassis doesn't let the reader stop there. He pivots into a deep dive on the underlying mechanics of how this patience actually operates in the messy reality of the world today.
The day-to-day operations.
Right. He distills this down into 6 core theological principles that serve as the operating system for this entire concept.
Let's get into those mechanics, because this is where the theology hits the pavement. Rather than just listing them out like a textbook, let's look at how they interact, starting with the baseline, the difference between restraint and apathy.
The first principle Vlassis establishes is that divine patience is not passivity. We touched on this with the toddler analogy, but it is the foundational rule.
It's intentional.
Exactly. When God does not strike down the corrupt politician or the abusive boss immediately, it is never because he's indecisive, distracted, or lacking the power to intervene. It is an active, highly mobilized providence. It takes more power to restrain ultimate force than to unleash it.
Which leads directly into the second principle. This patience coexists with holiness. It flows out of God's perfection, not a compromise of it.
Right, because it's easy for humans to be patient with small offenses. We secretly don't care that much about absolute moral perfection.
Yeah, we have a high tolerance for little white lies because we tell them ourselves.
Exactly. But God is depicted as infinitely holy. He cannot tolerate evil. Therefore, his patience is profoundly more costly. It is because he is the supreme judge who has the absolute right to execute immediate justice, that his choice to delay has any actual moral weight.
And by choosing that heavy, costly delay, he activates the third principle. This patience magnifies mercy.
Think about it from a structural standpoint. If judgment were an automated, instantaneous response to every sin, a zero-tolerance policy with immediate execution mercy would be functionally impossible.
It would be invisible.
By deliberately delaying the consequence, God creates this vast chronological space. It's an arena where human beings have the time to actually hear the gospel, where they have the time to feel conviction, to repent, and to experience transformation. Vlassis views time itself as a profound form of divine hospitality.
Okay, I track with all of that. But this brings us to a massive problem with human nature, which the author addresses in his fourth principle. And I'm going to push back hard here.
Let's hear it.
The principle is that patience exposes presumption. Vlassis cites the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 8, verse 11, which is one of the most chilling psychological observations in the ancient world.
It really is.
It says, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil.
It is a devastatingly accurate diagnosis of human behavior.
It really is. And it brings up a huge risk. If giving humanity a delay predictably causes millions of people to double down on their cruelty, I mean, if it creates this false sense of security where people think, hey, I cheated on my taxes and didn't get caught, I'll cheat more next year.
Right, they feel untouchable.
Yeah, isn't divine patience incredibly risky?
Yeah.
Isn't God inadvertently facilitating more evil by refusing to shut it down immediately?
That is the paradox at the heart of free will and delay. And Vlassis addresses this risk with arguably the most striking metaphor in the entire text. he writes. The same sun that melts wax hardens clay.
Okay, that is brilliant. Let's explore that.
The premise is that the delay itself, the extra time, the suspended sentence, it is never a neutral force. It acts upon the human heart the way the sun acts upon objects in a field.
It shines on everything equally.
Yes. But the result of the sun's heat doesn't depend on the sun. It depends entirely on the molecular composition of the object it's hitting.
So, to take it out of the theological realm for a second, think about a workplace scenario. You have two employees who are both massively behind on a critical high-stakes project. They drop the ball, and they both deserve to be fired. The boss calls them in, but instead of firing them, he grants them both a 2-week extension. He delays the judgment.
Perfect analogy. Now, how do they react?
Well, employee A is the wax. He realizes how incredibly lucky he is. He is overwhelmed by the boss's mercy. He works 14-hour days, completely changes his work ethic, and delivers a stellar project. The delay softened him and transformed his behavior.
But employee B is the clay. He leaves that meeting and thinks, wow, the boss is a total pushover. I can get away with murder here.
He abuses the grace.
He uses the 2-week extension to slack off even more, play video games, put in minimal effort, just confident that the rules don't really apply to him.
And the boss didn't treat them differently. The boss applied the exact same sunlight of an extension to both of them. But it produced wildly different outcomes.
Exactly. And Velazquez argues that this is the profound, terrifying function of divine patience. It creates a bifurcation in humanity.
It splits them.
It exposes what is truly fundamentally inside a person's heart. For the repentant person, the delay is salvation. For the defiant person, the delay actually becomes the instrument of their own hardening.
They look at the quiet skies and assume they're untouchable.
And they accumulate even more guilt. The text notes that the very same gospel announcement becomes an aroma of life to one and an aroma of death to another. God's patience doesn't create the rebellion. It merely gives the rebellion the rope to fully expose itself.
That is incredibly heavy. It implies that the time we are moving through right now is actively shaping us. We are either melting or hardening with every passing day that judgment is delayed.
And that reality is why the fifth principle is so vital. This patience is covenantal and relational.
So he's not just watching us melt or harden.
No, God isn't a passive scientist just watching the wax and the clay in a petri dish. He is actively involved. It is faithful love enduring offense. While the delay is happening, God is relentlessly pursuing, sending messengers, offering warnings, and orchestrating circumstances to try and wake the clay up before it sets permanently.
Which culminates in the final mechanism, the ultimate boundary line. This patience is limited, not endless.
It is patience existing under the shadow of a final judgment, not the permanent abolition of it. The author is unequivocal on this point. Noah's generation had 120 years of warning while the ark was being built. That was a long time. But the rain eventually started.
The timer ran out.
Jerusalem had centuries of prophets begging them to turn back, but the Babylonian army eventually breached the walls.
So the current age we are living in, this era held open by the cross, also has a hard stop.
Yes. Velazquez insists that history will not remain open indefinitely. There is a day of reckoning coming. The tension between holiness and mercy will finally be resolved permanently. The window will close.
So these 6 principles, the active restraint, the holiness, the mercy, the wax and clay dynamic, the relational pursuit, and the ticking clock, they are the gears turning underneath reality. But to really appreciate the scale of what Velazquez has mapped out, you have to look at the massive 12-stage visual timeline he includes in the infographics, which traces the grand narrative from eternity past to eternity future.
It is an incredibly ambitious visual representation. He charts the flow from eternity and creation through the fall, the establishment of the covenant, the redemption in the Exodus, the rise of the kingdom, the devastation of the exile.
It covers everything.
Then the restoration, the arrival of the Messiah, the current era of the church, the final judgment, the millennium and new creation, and ultimately back into eternity.
Obviously, we can't dissect all 12 stages without turning this into a 5-hour deep dive. But when you apply the lens of divine patience to specific eras on this timeline, certain stages just leap off the page and take on a totally new meaning.
Oh, for sure. The exile is one of the most fascinating case studies on this timeline. In the Old Testament narrative, the destruction of Jerusalem and the exile to Babylon looks like the ultimate failure. It looks like God finally snapped and gave up.
He just washed his hands of them.
But Velazquez frames it as the profound moment where patience and judgment publicly intersect. God had endured systemic idolatry and the exploitation of the poor for centuries. The exile was a catastrophic judgment. The temple destroyed, the people enslaved, but crucially, it wasn't the end of the timeline.
The line wasn't severed.
No, he preserved a remnant in Babylon. He sent prophets like Daniel and Ezekiel to them while they were in exile. It proves that even when the disciplinary hammer falls in the middle of history, God's long-term, patient plan for ultimate restoration remains fully in motion. The discipline was severe, but it was still an act of measured restraint compared to total annihilation.
And then, if you jump forward on the timeline to the church era, which is the exact stage you and I are breathing in right now, the infographic explicitly labels this specific epoch as the Age of Patience.
And that label changes everything about how we're supposed to view our current reality. The text states that the church is not designed to finalize judgment. It is designed to witness in the time of mercy.
That is a massive distinction, especially considering how much of the historical church has tried to violently enforce judgment on earth through inquisitions or political power grabs. The Lasis is arguing that the core identity of the church is entirely tied to the concept of delay.
Precisely. Christian mission itself is an expression of God waiting. The only reason the church exists and operates in the world today, building hospitals, feeding the poor, preaching the gospel, is to maximize this temporary window.
They are the farmhands.
Right. They are the farmhands instructed to leave the weeds alone and focus on the wheat. The church's job is to utilize the delay to invite as many people as possible into the restored relationship before the timer runs out.
Viewing history this way means our current cultural moment isn't just a chaotic, accidental waiting room where we are all just killing time until the end of the world. The author beautifully calls it history as the stage of God's long-suffering mercy.
Such a great phrase.
That means every single time the sun rises, it is a deliberate, conscious choice by the Creator to extend the timeline for the sake of human redemption.
And that timeline eventually, inevitably, leads to the stage he calls the new creation. And here, the Lysis makes a really poignant theological observation. In the ultimate consummation of all things, patience actually gives way to completion.
Wait, meaning patience ceases to exist?
In a sense, yes. The long, agonizing restraint comes to an end because it is a new reality where, as the text says, righteousness dwells natively. There is no more delay because there is no more threat of judgment.
There's nothing left to be patient about.
Right. There is no more need for patience towards sin because sin and rebellion will no longer exist in that renewed space.
The delay is no longer needed. The window of mercy closes, but it closes on a completed, secure house. You don't need to be patient with a toddler once they've grown into a mature, responsible adult.
Exactly. The goal of patience is always its own obsolescence.
But despite this massive, overarching historical evidence that Velazquez presents so clearly, human beings still manage to get this completely wildly wrong in our day-to-day thinking. We look at the quiet skies and we construct these elaborate, comforting lies to explain why judgment hasn't fallen.
We do love our comforting lies.
We really do. So the author dedicates a very sharp section to busting these specific myths.
Let's walk through these because they are incredibly relevant to how modern society functions. He identifies several major misunderstandings that warp our view of reality. The first myth is, God is patient because he is lenient.
Leniency is such an appealing concept to us. We want a cosmic grandfather who just chuckles at our mistakes and says, oh, don't worry about it.
But the source definitively rejects that. Leniency implies a lowering of the standard. It implies the judge doesn't actually care about the rules or the harm caused by breaking them. But as we established with the cross, God's patience is grounded in absolute holiness and a high-stakes redemptive purpose.
He absorbs the cost.
Right. He does not overlook sin permanently. He absorbs the cost of it to provide an opportunity for the offender. Patience proves he cares deeply about both the demands of justice and the soul of the offender. Leniency is cheap. Divine patience is incredibly expensive.
Which connects to the second myth. If judgment is delayed, it won't come at all. This is the ultimate presumption of the clay heart we talked about earlier.
And Scripture consistently and violently denies this assumption. The historical track record is undeniable. A delay is not a cancellation.
It's just a pause.
The people in Noah's day assumed the delay meant they were safe, but the flood came. The Pharaoh in Egypt thought the plagues would pass, but his army was swallowed. Jerusalem thought they were untouchable, but they fell to Babylon. Velazquez wants the reader to understand that a postponed sentence is still an absolutely certain sentence.
Myth number 3 is perhaps the most dangerous one in our current cultural moment. Patience means God approves of everyone's choices. If someone is living a lifestyle of greed, exploitation, or blatant immorality, but they are rich, healthy, and successful, the human brain short circuits.
We can't handle it.
We look at their success and say, well, God hasn't struck them down, so he must be okay with how they live.
It is a massive error in modern logic. We equate a lack of immediate negative consequence with the divine stamp of approval. But the same biblical texts that exalt God's patience also explicitly constantly warn of coming wrath and final accountability.
He's not confused about the weeds.
The author makes a crucial distinction here. Tolerance of a person's existence in time does not equal approval of their actions. The master lets the weeds grow, but he never mistakes them for wheat, and he certainly doesn't approve of them choking his crop.
The fourth myth shifts the focus a bit. It's the idea that human patience is just a personality trait. We look at someone who is incredibly patient and we say, oh, they are just naturally chill. They have a slow heart rate. They're an Enneagram 9. We reduce it to biology or temperament.
But in the framework Philosophy is building, true patience isn't just being naturally easygoing or conflict avoidant. In Christian theology, it is a fruit of the Spirit. It is an active, supernatural reflection and imitation of God's own character.
Like it's something you practice.
Yes. When a person practices true patience, when they actively restrain their right to get angry or exact revenge on someone who wronged them, they are literally mirroring the divine restraint that is holding the universe together. It is a profound spiritual achievement, not a genetic quirk.
And that brings us to the fifth myth, which is the one I really want to chew on because it feels like a paradox. The myth is divine patience makes urgency unnecessary.
This one is huge.
Because if I truly believe that God is endlessly patient, if I know he's characterized as being slow to anger, then logic dictates I have plenty of time. Why shouldn't I just take my time getting my life together? Why shouldn't I enjoy my rebellion now and repent later? If the door is propped open by the cross, why rush?
Because of the crucial, terrifying caveat we discussed, patience is not endless. The author is emphatic that treating divine patience as an excuse for procrastination is spiritual suicide.
It's basically abusing the grace.
Because the delay is a temporary window, the realization of that delay should produce intense urgency while mercy is still being offered. Philosophy states it with chilling clarity. Do not assume tomorrow belongs to you.
It's like knowing your favorite store is going out of business and having a massive 90% off liquidation sale, but the catch is you have no idea what time the owner is going to walk over and permanently lock the doors.
Right, you don't know when it ends.
You don't set up a lawn chair outside and dawdle on your phone. You sprint inside the second you realize what is happening because the opportunity is unprecedented, incredibly valuable, and strictly, invisibly limited.
That is the exact psychological tension the text is trying to engineer in the reader. The patience of God is supposed to be a source of profound existential comfort, but it should never, ever induce spiritual lethargy. The realization that you are standing on borrowed grace time should provoke an immediate, deeply grateful response.
So what does this all mean? Bringing all of this lofty theology down to earth, if the cosmic clock is ticking on this window of mercy, how is this realization supposed to change the way you and I actually live our lives on a random Tuesday? Philosophy breaks down the practical implications for different facets of life, starting with the internal life of the individual.
For the individual, the primary application is rapid repentance. When you recognize you've done wrong, whether you snapped at your spouse, lied at work, or harbored deep bitterness, you don't misuse God's patience by delaying your turnaround.
You don't put it off.
You don't let the sun go down on your rebellion. You recognize that every single day you wake up without having faced judgment is a merciful, customized callback to the path.
But at the same time, the author notes, there is a deep comfort here. If you are actively trying to grow, but you keep stumbling, you don't need to live in terror of immediate destruction. You find comfort in the fact that God is patient with your slow growth.
It's relational.
He deals with human fragility as a father training a toddler, not as an executioner standing over a trapdoor.
And for those in positions of leadership or ministry, the mandate shifts slightly. The author says leaders must preach and lead with urgency while the door is open. You lead as a steward of this grace time.
How does that look practically?
Practically, that means you bear with the weaknesses and the slow growth of the people you lead, giving them the necessary time and space to mature, but you absolutely refuse to normalize or endorse willful, high-handed rebellion.
Which requires an incredible amount of wisdom. Patience is not permissiveness. A good leader doesn't crush someone for struggling, but they also don't turn a blind eye to someone actively setting fires in the organization.
Exactly. And then there are the implications for how we interpret our own daily struggles. Velazquez argues that understanding divine patience fundamentally changes how we view unanswered prayers.
Oh, that is huge. Because when we pray for something and hear silence, our default assumption is that God is absent or punishing us.
But if you understand that delay is a core mechanism of divine operation, you realize that an unanswered prayer doesn't mean you are forgotten. A delayed consequence or a delayed rescue doesn't mean the system is broken. It means you are caught up in a much larger, slower, more purposeful timeline than your own immediate desires.
And finally, it completely reshapes how we treat each other. In your family, your workplace, and your community, you are called to embody this. You become a conduit. Divine patience becomes the ultimate, unyielding template for human patience.
Right. When you truly deeply internalize how much cosmic patience has been expended on your behalf. I mean, how many times the gavel should have dropped on your life but was held back by the cross. It becomes mathematically impossible for you to be violently impatient with the people around you.
It changes everything.
You stop panicking when change is slow in your own life. And crucially, you stop lashing out in rage when others inevitably fail you. You extend the window to them that was extended to you.
So, stepping back from all the historical timelines, the parables, and the theological principles, what is the ultimate bottom line of Cursor Velazquez's work?
The author distills this entire massive exploration into one powerful, summarizing truth. He writes, "Divine patience is holy mercy with a purpose and a deadline. Mercy today, judgment tomorrow."
Mercy today, judgment tomorrow.
The Lord delays the final, rightful judgment of a broken world strictly because he is in the business of saving it. That restraint is his patience, and ultimately that restraint is his glory.
Holy mercy with a purpose and a deadline. That is an incredible summary of a really complex body of work. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring this right back to you, the person listening to this right now.
Yes, the listener.
If there is one singular thing to take away from our exploration today, it is this. Do not mistake the delay in your life for silence. Do not look at the quiet skies and assume that because the consequences haven't arrived, your actions don't matter. This deep dive is an invitation to view your own life, your own breath, and the seemingly mundane time you have today as a profound, deeply purposeful gift of mercy.
It is a gift of time, purchased at an agonizing cost, granted by a holy God who desires your restoration vastly more than the wisdom he desires your immediate destruction.
But it leaves me with one final thought, something that wasn't explicitly laid out in the text but feels overwhelmingly relevant to the moment we are living in.
What's that?
We live in a modern culture defined entirely by the demand for instant gratification. We want our food in 5 minutes, our packages in 1 day, and our justice in milliseconds. We have built an entire ecosystem of cancel culture where we demand immediate, total digital annihilation the very second someone makes a mistake. We want people ruined instantly, publicly, and permanently.
It's true, the digital mob is merciless.
But in indulging that reflex, have we completely lost the ability to comprehend, let alone practice, the kind of long-term patience Velazquez is talking about? If we relentlessly demand instant destruction for every wrong we see on our screens today, are we actually resisting and rebelling against the very nature of the divine mercy that is actively keeping us alive? Think about that the next time you find yourself demanding that the gavel drop immediately on someone else.